to the Alex at Bat podcast. I'm Jason with my host Alex. Today we're going to be discussing the wild card playoff round of the 2017 season that we are presently in. I figured the first game up that we'll talk about is the Buffalo-Jacksonville game. My recap of that 10-3 win by Jacksonville goes something like this. Because that's what I did during most of the game. It was a pretty boring one. It really looked like it was going nowhere through the first half and then pretty much continued that pattern through the second. There was a field goal on either side in the second quarter for both the Bills and the Jaguars. And the Jaguars, I guess the big difference maker obviously there was the Jaguars touchdown in the third quarter and polishing off the game with a 0-0 fourth. What were your takeaways from that game as far as what this says, I guess, about the Bills and the end of their season moving forward next? And then also, what does this say about Jacksonville moving forward through the playoffs?
Their defense is something to watch out for.
The Jacksonville defense. That was the highlight of the game, was watching the Jacksonville defense really take it to the Bills.
And next week they play the Pittsburgh Steelers, so that's going to be a good matchup against their top receivers too.
Yes.
We'll really, that's going to be a really good matchup to see, if they're going to be able to compete with good offenses to go continuing to move into playoffs.
I mean, do you think that, is it Blake Bortles, quarterback for the Jacksonville Jaguars? Do you think Bortles stands a chance? I mean, I know we're kind of jumping ahead in time away from the Bills Jacksonville deal, but how do you think the Steelers defense is going to play out against, or how do you think it's going to play out against Bortles and his lackluster performance with the Jacksonville offense?
Well, you definitely have a lot of questions too, because the Steelers led the league in sacks this year, and they can put pressure on the quarterback. And the one thing is just, with Blake Bortles, the offense just doesn't, make enough plays to win games. They've gotten lucky a lot with their extraordinary, great defense, but we're really going to find out if Blake Bortles can find ways to win games.
Yeah, I mean, in this game, 12 for 23 with 187. That's giving them way too much. 87 yards passing. I mean, that's just dismal. And then you go on the ground. The only positive about that ground game was Blake Bortles for 88 yards rushing. So if he wasn't really doing it through the air, at least he got it done with his legs. But still, I mean, you want a quarterback that's slinging the ball downfield too, or at least making some big plays with the arm.
Absolutely. Obviously, with the Blake Bortles too, is that this team, though, you could probably run the ball against. They're going to have to run the ball a lot if they want to beat the Steelers, because they're one of the worst defenses in stopping the run throughout the whole season. They had a lot of 100-yard rushers during the season, and they're, especially too with the loss of Ryan Shazier, their linebacker, and ever since he's been gone, the run defense has gotten worse. So I think that they have to run the ball a lot, and I think that there's third and longs like Bortles is going to have to convert if he wants to win those games, because this isn't a game where you can just be sluggish the way how Blake Bortles was. It just didn't look right, I would say.
D.D. Westbrook and Leonard Fournette were the two main receivers in this game. Not that they were putting up any staggering numbers, 48 for Westbrook, 21 yards total for Fournette. But, I mean, are those guys that have been getting it done throughout the year? I mean, obviously they put themselves in the position to even make the wild card round. They won it. I mean, do these guys stand a chance of doing something big against the Steelers?
Leonard Fournette, I think, had a 1,000-yard season. So he's definitely... Obviously, they're going to have to use him a lot.
Right.
And especially, too, last time the Jaguars played the Steelers, he had over 180 yards of rushing and an 82-yard touchdown, too, in that game. So they need to use the ground game for sure this game.
Okay.
And obviously, they need Keelan Cole is D.D. Westbrook, been a good player, but he wasn't the standout rookie receiver like Keelan Cole was. And he didn't really do anything that game, nor did the offense in general. I mean, they weren't doing anything impressive. It was just showed how great their defense was. They had two guys who had, during the season, had double-digit sacks. And, it just proves how they call them Saxonville. They're second in the league with sacks, and the first is Steelers. So that's going to be a good job to see if those two teams can put pressure on the quarterback. And I think whoever can put the most pressure on the quarterback and, makes Makes a lot of sacks, like Saxonville.
Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yep. If they can do that, I think they have a chance. But, obviously Blake Bortles has to do a lot too because Ben last game though, they were playing a quarterback like Tyrod Taylor, who, has been okay during his career, but he's not like a Ben Roethlisberger, who's a 2-time Super Bowl champ who knows how to win the big games.
Right.
This is a game where they have to score points if they want to win. They can't score 3 points because Ben Roethlisberger is a quarterback who will take advantage of that and score points and put a lot more pressure on Blake Bortles. So this is going to be a good test too because you're going against a guy who made the Super Bowl 3 times in his career, who wins the big games. He's made it to a lot of AFC championships. So he's honestly this year probably second closest to Tom Brady in the league when it comes to
I feel like in that game,
players.
I mean they're squeaking by in the wild card round with a pretty unimpressive win. It almost feels like they need an identity shift.
Absolutely.
Like they gotta come out as a team that they haven't shown before. So
I have to say also
that's a big ask for any team
too. Is that
position.
Ben Roethlisberger I think is fourth in the league in interceptions. He had 14, and the third of his interceptions came from Jacksonville because Ben Roethlisberger got picked off 5 times during the season against Jacksonville. So it proves how good their defense is. So, and most of it was because of, hits on the quarterback. Obviously, them, during that week, they were trying to force the ball to Antonio Brown.
Right.
And after that, they kind of stopped doing it as much. They did it when he was open, and it kind of worked that way. So, and most of the interceptions came off of, hits on Ben Roethlisberger, putting pressure on him.
Right. You're forcing him to make, 50-50 shot
Absolutely.
passes.
He threw the ball over 50 times, I think, that game. So he was throwing the ball a lot. And they're going to have to do that too because they're going to have to do a lot of things right. I think both of these teams have to do a lot of things right.
You know what? That's interesting. Kind of getting a little bit off topic, but you mentioned that he was fourth in the league in interceptions.
Yeah, he had 14, I think.
With 14 interceptions. But you also mentioned by the same token that he's thrown a ton of passes, like 50-some passes. Do they keep track of – I know they keep track, obviously, of interceptions, like total interceptions, and that's always a big number. But when you put that number of interceptions up against the total number of passes, I mean, it's a game of probability. The more passes you throw, the more interceptions you're likely to have. Do they keep such a statistic where they show the percentage of intercepted passes out of the total number of passes? Is that part of pass efficiency or any kind of efficiency rating?
I think if you want to look at that, it's probably maybe in the PFF sets, something like that, percentage wise and stuff like that. But it's not something you can find interceptions or something like that.
Right.
If you want to go deep, you gotta see how many times he attempted the ball. I think over the season he's attempted the ball over 500 times.
Wow.
And a lot